Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Demuth, Speaker of the House. Today's forecast gives us a chance to, as you've heard, pass a bipartisan tax conformity bill that would actually help workers through common sense policies, such as no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, as well as help our Main Street businesses continue to be the job creators that Minnesota so desperately needs. What I will tell you, though, is tax increases on Minnesota families and more government spending should be off the table. Our focus must remain on lowering costs on family budgets. As you heard the work of MMB, they said to offset any new spending needs to be offset with spending or reductions, savings. That's what we need to do here. We know that structural imbalance is still an issue, as you saw in the out years. We still have a spending problem. We need to rein that in. Our work, as you heard, last year helped very much, but there's still much more to do. So we're seeing yet again that Minnesotans are overtaxed, with another forecast that's showing we do have a higher tax revenue than expected. We're also seeing that conformity to program integrity requirements set by the federal government is a necessary step to cut down on fraud and ensure that dollars are going to those that need it the most, as well as to ensure that we don't lose the federal dollars. We need to act. House Republicans stand ready in 3 ways: federal tax conformity. We're also looking to take the pressure off of family budgets, and we want to stop fraud. Those are top priorities for Minnesotans across the state, and we look forward to the work that will be done this legislative session, this shortened year. I'm going to turn it over to Leader Harry Niska.
Thank you, Speaker Demuth. My name is Harry Niska, the Republican floor leader in the Minnesota House. This forecast really demonstrates that pro-growth economic policies and economic growth are the real solution to both our economy and also the fiscal situation that Minnesota has. One of the major drivers in the improved economic outlook is the national economic rebound driven by federal policy from Washington, D.C., pushed by Republicans. That's the real solution to the fiscal disaster we've seen in Minnesota from Minnesota Democrats. We need to reverse the policies that are holding our state economy back so we can fully participate in that national economic rebound. We saw this from what the Minnesota Chamber recently released. They did economic benchmarks looking at where we are at compared to the other states in our country in economic growth. Minnesota is falling behind in economic growth compared to other states, falling back to 33rd in GDP growth, 39th in job growth, and 46th in growth in medium household income. Even if Minnesota were to improve its economic policy to where we were in the middle of the pack, we would actually be in that much better of an economic situation. So Minnesota needs to dramatically reduce its or dramatically improve its tax and regulatory environment, its economic competitiveness, so that we can keep up with the rest of the country. Unfortunately, Minnesota Democrats are too focused on fighting against the federal administration and fighting against those economic opportunities to allow us to fully participate in that economic rebound. The recent announcement from Senator Klobuchar that she's going to vote against new mining opportunities in northern Minnesota is a perfect illustration of the wrong direction that Minnesota Democrats are focused on. We should be trying to fully capture the economic rebound that's happening in the rest of the country here in Minnesota. This also demonstrates how we need to continue the fight on fraud. We saw today that health and human services costs started dropping as soon as the administration finally started checking for fraud in these programs. That's the bare minimum that the administration is doing right now. We have a robust plan we've been talking about for years and years and years, and we have the opportunity to cut down dramatically on the amount that the state pays out to fraudsters. It's good, I guess, that finally in the 8th year of this governor's administration, he's implemented some bare measures of fraud that have slowed down the avalanche of fraud that's been allowed under his administration. But imagine what we would have saved if he had taken Republicans seriously when he came into office instead of paying out billions of dollars to fraudsters over the years. Minnesota Republicans are going to continue to fight for program integrity, and considering the fact that, as the governor acknowledged, a big part of the Democrats' newly announced fraud plans are provisions that Republicans have been advocating for, fighting with Democrats for years and years, we expect that we're going to be able to make some really serious additional progress on stopping fraud, and that should improve our economic outlook going forward as well. So now I'll turn it over to Senate Leader Mark Johnson.
Well, good afternoon. And first of all, cheers to the national government right now and the policies that they're putting in place that are pro-business, making sure that our national government or our national economy is growing in a way that allows Minnesotans to reap the benefits from that. That's really what saved Minnesota's budget right now. Cheers to Minnesota Democrats that continue to focus on government needs. We got to make sure that we are focusing on the needs of Minnesotans for affordability. That means tax conformity. That means making sure that we're lowering things such as tab fees for vehicles. That means that we're focusing on things that affect things like property taxes. Look, we need to make sure that we're doing the things that focus on Minnesotans, putting them first throughout every policy that we do. And what we saw today was really a model of what Minnesotans should be focusing on, and that's how to grow this economy. We've got an opportunity here. We've got a lot of work in front of us. Democrats are still in a position right now where we're spending more than we're taking in. The only reason why we have money left on the bottom line is because our savings account still has money in it so we can write checks. That's going to run out soon. If we don't fix that, we're going to be in a heap of trouble. This session, we got to work together and making sure that we are focusing on Minnesotans and trimming down the government spending in a way that helps out this state to make sure they can grow and prosper in ways that we haven't seen for a long time. You saw the tone of the governor today. It really was a different tone that I haven't seen from him. I think trying to really cover up a lot of the work that we have in front of us, a lot of the wrong decisions that were made over the last two previous years under that trifecta. We have a lot of work in front of us, and we're going to be buckling down here now with the forecast out, that we're going to be doing that going forward and trying to figure out how to put Minnesotans first again, not state government. With that, I think most of the other points have been covered very well with House leadership. I think we're all open to take questions.
Madam Speaker, can you talk about tax conformity ultimately, as I would understand it, if you conform to some of the tax on tips and overtime, that would reduce revenues into the state at a time when there is that structural imbalance still? Are you concerned about that, and do you know how much it would hit the state budget to do that?
Yep, the question is on tax conformity, how it would hit the state budget. And I want to clarify, as we heard from MMB, they said to offset any new spending with savings or spending reductions is what we need to do. So when we're looking at that tax conformity, the whole idea would be to make things more affordable for Minnesotans. As we have seen our costs rise and other things that make it harder here in our state, as we're talking property taxes and some of the other things that Minnesota families are facing, higher tab fees, and all of those things that make it more expensive. The idea, and as you heard from the state economist talking about that K-shaped economy, you know, we're looking at that middle class or a little bit lower than middle class of how things hit them. No tax on tips specifically in the first fiscal year would be $126 million. No tax on overtime would be $265 million. That is a hefty amount when we're looking at where the budget is, but I want to remind you of where we were in 23 and 24 with excess taxes. Excess spending. We had the $18 billion surplus, and what we didn't do for Minnesota families then is we didn't give them relief, we taxed them more. It is catching up with us. Right now, our state looks okay with a deficit down the road. We have to be smart, but we also have to make sure that job creators and job providers can do what they need to in the state to grow our economy and then still make things affordable for Minnesotans. Thanks for the question.
Madam Speaker, what about the uncertainty that comes from the federal government? The forecast cited immigration, trade, and tariffs as the greatest source of uncertainty, and that all comes from the federal government.
Yeah, as you heard earlier too, that our state economist said slightly improved national economic outlook is what is driving having higher revenue forecasts. So you heard that. National things are positively affecting us. Right now, the changes at the federal government, we have to make sure that we are doing everything to comply with those, such as the backgrounds that they need, and we need to make sure that there is the ability, if people are on SNAP, if there's work requirements, there are things we can do here at a state level that will help us avoid any cuts. But when we're looking at fraud, and it has gone on for years under the current administration, there needs to be a level of responsibility that when it wasn't taken at a state level, the feds are going to help us make sure that there is not more fraud going on.
Would you support full tax conformity, and can you talk about some of the areas where you might look to cut to find those potentially billions of dollars?
So what we're going to be looking at, and I'm not saying right now that we need to do full tax conformity. Would I like to? Absolutely. I want to make things more affordable for Minnesotans. But our Ways and Means chairs, our tax chairs, our caucuses are going to be looking, and for every dollar that is either unspent or could come back, they're going to be doing that hard work together. We are still in a tie in the House, and as you heard the governor say how well we worked together last year, we have that opportunity, both Democrats and Republicans in the House, and then along with our Senate colleagues, to do the good work for Minnesotans. Whatever dollars we can find for savings, we will absolutely do that.
Speaker Demuth, do you support the federal government withholding Medicaid dollars from Minnesota for fraud?
We know that we need to prevent fraud here in the state of Minnesota, and if it takes the feds putting on a little bit more pressure on Minnesota, I absolutely support preventing fraud here in the state so our tax dollars aren't stolen any longer.
Do you think this is preventing fraud, that withholding the money is preventing fraud?
I think it makes sure that the people that are going to be receiving dollars actually are legitimate people that are needing those dollars. Right now, we know that this is what is proposed. There are things in the courts. There are things that we don't even have the full details of yet.
Are you worried, though, about collateral damage to people who rely on the services who aren't committing fraud?
We know that we are taking care of people in Minnesota as they need to be. We have to look back. As you heard just a couple of days ago, there's going to be a look back process.
Speaker Demuth, sorry.
No problem.
Maybe in a year. Donald Trump, during his State of the Union address, he said that Somali pirates are pillaging the state of Minnesota, and that $19 billion of dollars they've taken from the state of Minnesota. Do you agree with the president that Somalis are been pillaging the state of Minnesota and committing fraud?
What I know here in the state of Minnesota is we have record fraud. Whoever has committed that record fraud, it has gone unchecked for years here in the state. We need better accountability within our programs. Obviously, you heard earlier that Governor Walz said, the programs, just cutting programs maybe isn't what we should do, yet Governor Walz is the one that cut the housing stabilization services because it was riddled with fraud. Minnesota has a fraud problem that needs to end, and that is the focus that we're working on.
Mayor Niska, you just said a moment earlier that we need to reverse the policies that are holding our state economy back. What policies are you referencing there?
Sure. So in the trifecta, Democrats dramatically reduced the energy that we can produce in the state of Minnesota. They created this unrealistic, no carbon-free by 2040 policy that bans most of the forms of energy that Minnesotans rely on. There were massive increases in regulatory mandates on businesses throughout our state. We're one of the highest tax states in the country. I think the Chamber benchmark report does a pretty good job of laying out all of the ways in which Minnesota is one of the most difficult states in the country to invest in, to create jobs in, to start a business in, to grow a business in. We heard just a mention earlier from the state economist that Minnesota just this last year was one of the first years we've been positive in net migration within the state. The reality is, economically productive Minnesotans are leaving the state of Minnesota because of the negative the negative business climate in the state of Minnesota. It's very, very difficult for Minnesota to compete in our 50-state economy with the regulatory and tax environment that Democrats have imposed on the state.
But how can you say that when the revenue of the state keeps growing beyond expectations? Every time we come here, we see a revenue number that is above what was previously forecast. So why does it matter if rich people are moving away?
Right. So the reason we have a higher revenue number, the top line reason that that's being driven is because of overall economic growth of the entire United States economy. That's a result of overall the positive economic benefits of federal policy driven by Republicans in Washington, D.C.
But you know,
Minnesota.
the nation's economy grew slower last year than the previous 2 years. You know that, right?
Our nation's economy is doing better now, and the outlook for it is better now than it was the last time.
It was worse last year.
SPGMI did.
It was worse last year than the previous 2 years.
And Minnesota is lagging behind the rest of the national economy. Read the Chamber of Commerce benchmark report, and it lays it out pretty well. We used to be sort of middle of the pack in terms of all kinds of economic growth metrics, and we're falling down into the 30s and 40s on all these economic growth metrics. And that should be pretty concerning, I think, to Minnesotans as we think about the importance of economic growth to our fiscal health going forward.
The governor floated some IT upgrades as a possible spend this year. Is that something your caucus would support?
And not only is that something that our caucus would support, it's something that our caucus had to fight with Democrats last year in order to get the governor gave the example of the SSIS funding. The state has sort of neglected investment in this program, in the basic infrastructure that we expect counties to use to implement a lot of these social safety programs that we expect counties to administer. And Republicans had to fight tooth and nail with Democrats to get funding for that last year. I'm glad to hear that now the governor is acknowledging that that was really important that we did last year. But it is, if we're going to put burdens on our counties, we have to give them the tools that they need in order to be able to administer those programs.
We've got time for one more, guys.
What about Speaker Demuth and Majority Leader both mentioned property taxes? What's the caucus plan for reducing property taxes?
Yeah, we're looking at everything on the table. Obviously, what we were just talking about was a big driver in the property taxes. This last year, the state put more and more burdens on counties, and that's a lot of the big drivers. We're going to look at every solution we can to figure out how we, number one, reduce the burdens on cities and counties, school districts, paid family medical leave, ESST, a lot of the labor mandates that were put on by Democrats are a big driver in that. But in terms of looking at potential ways to offer direct relief for property taxes.
Any specifics, or just, reducing the burdens on cities and counties is very broad?
Yep, we're looking at all those solutions. Obviously, we have to work something out bipartisan
So no
fashion.
specifics?
Other than the specifics I just gave you, no.
Okay.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.